Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachanine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Prastata Deshanine. So today we're reading from Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, entitled The Status Quo. And we're on chapter 1, entitled Questions by Vidura, on text 20. Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Text 20, please repeat. Itam Brajan Padatameva Varsham. Itam Brajan Padatameva Varsham. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Tavashcha Sashitameka Chakram. Tavashcha Sashitameka Chakram. Tavashcha Sashitameka Chakram. Tavashcha Sashitameka Chakram. Ekata Patram Ajitena Partam. Ekata Patram Ajitena Partam. Itam Rajan Bharatam Eva Varsham. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Tavashcha Sashitameka Chakram. Ekata Patram Ajitena Partam. Please chant.
Itam Rajan Bharatam Eva Varsham. Kalena Yavad Gatavan Prabhasam. Tavachcha Sachitim Eka Chakram. Ekata Patram Jitena Partha.
Itam Rajan Bharatam Eva Varsham. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Tavachcha Sasachim Eka Chakram. Ekata Patram Ajitena Partha.
Itam Rajan Bharatam Eva Varsham. Kalena Yavagatavan Prabhasam. Tavachcha Sashitam Eka Chakram. Ekata Patram Ajitena Partha. Itam Rajan Bharatam Eva Varsham. Kalena Yavagatavan Prakasham. Tavachcha Sashitam Eka Chakram. Ekata Patram Ajitena Partha.
Anybody else? Word for word synonyms, please repeat. Itam.
Itam
like this.
like this.
Rajan,
Rajan,
while traveling.
while traveling.
Bharatam,
Bharatam,
India.
India,
Eva,
Eva,
only.
only.
Varsham,
Varsham,
the tract of land.
tract of land.
Kalena,
Kalena,
in due course of time.
In due course of time.
Yavat,
Yavat,
when.
When
Gatavan,
Talavana
visited.
visited.
Prabhasam,
Prabhasam,
the Prabhasa pilgrimage site.
the Prabhasa pilgrimage site.
Tavat,
Talavana,
at that time.
at that time.
Shashasan,
Shashasan,
ruled.
ruled.
Shitam,
Shitam,
the world.
the world.
Ekachakram,
Ekachakram,
by one military force.
by one military force.
Eka,
Eka,
one.
one.
Atapatram,
Atapatram,
flag.
flag.
Agitena,
Agitena,
by the mercy of the unconquerable Krishna.
the mercy of the unconquerable Krishna.
Partha,
Partha,
Maharaj Yudhishthir. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thus, so this is Shukadev Goswami speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, and he's describing how Vidura was on pilgrimage. Because why is he explaining this? Because he's leading up to the point of how did Vidura meet Maitreya and get transcendental instructions. So here he's leading up to that point. How did Vidura meet Maitreya? So thus, when he, Vidura, was in the land of Bharatavarsha, traveling to all the places of pilgrimage, he visited Prabhasa Kshetra. At that time, Maharaj Yudhishthir was the emperor and held the world under one military strength and one flag. Purport. More than 5,000 years ago, while Saint Vidura was traveling the earth as a pilgrim, India was known as Bharatavarsha, as it is known even today. The history of the world cannot give any systematic account for more than 3,000 years into the past. But before that, the whole world was under the flag and military strength of Maharaj Yudhishthir, who was the emperor of the world. At present, there are hundreds and thousands of flags flapping in the United Nations. But during the time of Vidura, there was, by the grace of Ajita, Lord Krishna, only one flag. The nations of the world are very eager to again have one state under one flag. But for this, they must seek the favor of Lord Krishna, who alone can help us become one worldwide nation. End of Srila Prabhupada's purport. So I think this is a very interesting and even timely purport, because if you at all keep up with, I mean, I don't, it's just I look at the headlines, you know, but if you at all hear about what's going on in the world today, Ati Sundari's like, what? What world? She's in the transcendental world. Like the biggest topic, or one of the biggest topics in the world today, is all about one world government. Isn't it? They call it, excuse me, they call it the New World Order, NWO. This is not a new thing. For decades and decades, people have discussed this concept of a one world government. Interestingly, on the common level, like with the citizens, generally we're all fighting for freedom and independence. And every year, practically without fail, there's some kind of civil war happening somewhere. And then you look at the map, And it's like, oh, by golly, that country that used to be known as such and such is now split up into at least 2, if not 3 portions with different names. We're just constantly fighting for independence and freedom. But interestingly, it's not necessarily for our own good. We don't even know what our real self-interest is. So in Vedic times, there was one world government, not more than one flag. And if you analyze that type of situation, I think it doesn't take a whole lot of intelligent analysis to understand that, yeah, actually, theoretically, this is the best solution to bring peace to the world. Today, I and my family, we live in one house, and you and your family, you live in another house. And when push comes to shove, if there's only enough food to feed 4 people, I'm going to grab it for my family, and you're going to try to grab it for your family. So there will be some competition. And the only way I can win is if I somehow or other exploit you or cheat you or beat you down. Go beyond the family. Oh, we've got like sports, right? My football team's gonna whip your football team. Because we identify as 2 separate entities. 20,000 of us might identify as, the University of such and such. And another 20,000 will identify as the University of such and such. And when the 2 football teams come together, they try to, defeat each other. So similarly, on the global level, the national level, we have how many countries on this planet? I don't know, we can't count them right now, there's too much. But every country, obviously, wants their country to prosper. They want good, economic system and a peaceful social system, etc., etc. But in order for that to happen, because that's how the economy works in the material world, for my country's economy to be really booming, I have to take advantage of your country. So how will this competitive, envious, exploitative mentality ever be cured? So in the Vedic solution, there was one world government, so that all human beings were on the same page. Can you imagine having all 8 billion human beings that are currently on planet Earth all on the same page? Can't imagine it. It's like mind-boggling. So it's not that man hasn't recognized this difficulty. So back in the day, very intelligent men came together and they formed what's called the United Nations. And they said, we will solve all these problems of, exploitation and competition, etc., etc. We'll become united. So we'll call it the United Nations. But did that union actually resolve conflicts? Did it actually make us all united, not on the same page? No. And the proof is that if you visit the United Nations, every year they have an additional flag to hoist up there. One more country, another country, a couple more countries. So Srila Prabhupada heavily would make the point that all attempts by man to solve economic problems, so-called food shortages problems, or energy shortage problems, or now seed shortage problems, whatever natural resource, depletion problems, environmental problems, whatever the problem is. When man tries to use their, intellect and reasoning and got their big, big plans, it never works out. Maybe for 10 years, like you come up with a really good economic rescue plan and we implement it, and for 10 years, by golly, it really does look like we're booming economically. But how long will it last? It's not a permanent solution. And what happens when that solution runs out of steam? It comes crashing to the ground and breaks into teeny tiny pieces and causes humongous social and economic chaos. So we can use the example of building a house. You might build a very beautiful, costly palace. But if you fail to build it on a proper foundation, what's going to happen? How long will that house last? We think, it lasted 100 years. That's nothing. But without a foundation, the whole house will come collapsing down. Similarly, there's unlimited problems in the material world. That's the nature of the place. And they all rest upon the 4 pillars of problems, and that is birth, death, old age, and disease. And we have for centuries and millennia been trying to implement material solutions. We have to come to the point where we fall to our knees and recognize that, oh my gosh, without putting God in this formula, everything is a failure. So I found a few quotes from Prabhupada about the United Nations that I actually wanted to share. Let's see here. Here's something from the 4th canto. Prabhupada says that if people follow the injunctions given by the great sages, Shrutis and Smritis, they can actually be happy in both this life and the next. Unfortunately, rascals are manufacturing so many ways and means to be happy. Everyone is inventing so many methods. Consequently, human society has lost the standard ways of life, both materially and spiritually. And as a result, people are bewildered, and there's no peace or happiness in the world. He says, no peace or happiness. Now you're going to argue, oh, come on, there's some happiness, there's some peace. Prabhupada says, there's no happiness or peace in the world. Because whatever happiness or peace you're pointing your finger to, it's like that house standing on a missing foundation. It's just an illusion. Although they're trying to solve the problems of human society in the United Nations, they are still baffled because they do not follow the liberated instructions of the Vedas. They are unhappy. So Prabhupada's comment here in the 4th canto, strongly making the point that unless we base our solutions on the Shastra, the scripture, and the saintly persons, they are bound to fail and cause us to be unhappy. Here's another quote from Prabhupada from the 8th canto. Prabhupada says, communists think in terms of their own nations, but the spiritual communism instructed here is not only nationwide, but universal. Prabhupada would say, we're spiritual communists. Nothing belongs to any nation or any individual. Everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the meaning of this verse. Atma vasyam idam vishvam. Whatever exists within this universe is the property of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The modern communistic theory And also the idea of the United Nations can be reformed, indeed rectified, by the understanding that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is not a creation of our intelligence, rather He has created us. Atma Vasyam Idam Vishvam, Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam. This universal communism can solve all the problems of the world. Now, Prabhupada actually speaks, quite a bit about this idea of spiritual communism and a one-world government run by a Vaishnava, like Maharaj Yudhishthira, like Maharaj Parikshit, like Maharaj Prithu, and others given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why does Prabhupada spend so much time, describing and glorifying these perfect one-world governments? Some devotees have ascertained that Prabhupada really believed that someday we're going to have that again, like in our lifetime or within the 10,000-year golden period, golden age. Others have said, no, it's not possible to happen in Kali Yuga, it's just impossible. So, I can't pass a judgment on that, what's going to really happen in the future. But Prabhupada did explain and glorify this system. So we might not see it ever happen in the greater world, but at least we can implement it within our own devotee communities of imbibing this mentality. Everything belongs to Krishna. I might have things that I utilize, because Krishna gave me these things to utilize, but we can't become attached to things and people and what have you, that they belong to me. We have to imbibe at least the principle of spiritual communism. And if we don't, it's just a matter of time before we have factions and quarreling and competition and schisms and whatever. So there is a take-home point here. Prabhupada speaks strongly on, one world spiritual communism, but we shouldn't doubt him that, why is he speaking like that? It's never going to happen in the world. He's asking for us at least to imbibe it. And at least we should know the philosophy so that we could, if possible, if we got the opportunity, to advise people who are leaders of countries and nations. Someday, hopefully, Vaishnavas will be able to offer their advice to the United Nations even. They might not do anything about it and take our advice, but at least we should know. Or when we go out in the public, like I told you, this is a big topic right now, a one world government. So if you're out in the public representing Prabhupada and somebody asks you, what do you Hare Krishnas think about a one world government? Well, you better be able to answer that properly. Yeah, we totally accept this idea of a one world government, but with a caveat. And that it has to have an extremely qualified, trained, saintly leader. If it's not, if the leader's not on that platform, then it's a disaster. And Prabhupada himself also, in many places, comments that due to Kali Yuga, the degrading nature of Kali Yuga, that monarchies became corrupt, therefore they were overthrown and democracy has replaced it. So, but at least we should know the theory. Another comment by Srila Prabhupada from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. If people follow the injunctions, from early histories, it appears that the entire earth was under one culture, Vedic culture. But gradually, due to religious and cultural divisions, the rule fragmented into many subdivisions. Now the earth is divided into many countries, religions, and political parties. So it's not that in Vedic culture there wasn't variety, but that variety was, if you will, subservient to the unity. Unity in diversity, diversity in unity. But that unity was Krishna. So it didn't cause divisions. Now the earth is divided into many countries, religions, and political parties. Despite these political and religious divisions, we advocate that everyone should unite again under one culture, Krishna consciousness. People should accept one God, Krishna, one scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, and one activity, devotional service to the Lord. Thus people may live happily upon this earth and combine to produce sufficient food. I'm currently in my personal reading in the 4th canto, about Prithu Maharaj being enthroned as the world emperor. And very strong points are being made there that it's the duty of the governmental leader to make sure there's proper food for all the citizens. Because if there's proper, abundant food grains for the citizens, they will, of course, be healthy. They won't be angry, because anger comes from, hunger. A lot of crime out there. There's a lot of violent crime out there. A lot of that's caused because people can't even meet their basic needs that even the animals get, like daily food for their family. So we're competing with each other and even killing each other over it. Today, farmers are paid to not grow. They're also paid to take whatever they did grow and throw it in the ocean. Because there's demonic persons making these decisions. So here, Prabhupada said, why do you want a one-world government? So we can all work together to produce sufficient food. No competition. In such a society, there would be no question of scarcity, famine, or cultural or religious degradation. You would not hear them saying, there's a seed shortage. How ridiculous that is. Therefore, they are all meant to serve Krishna, the original Supreme Father. If this philosophy is accepted, the failure of the United Nations to unite all nations will be sufficiently compensated all over the world by a great Krishna consciousness movement. So I'll stop there, but this is a very strong statement Prabhupada made here. He said that if we could convince the world about this accepting Krishna as the common Supreme Father, that if this philosophy is accepted, the failure of the United Nations to unite all nations would be sufficiently compensated all over the world by a great Krishna consciousness movement. So this is a big, big order Prabhupada has given for our Krishna consciousness movement. Not just, go out and sell a few books, but to actually convince the world to accept this spiritual communistic philosophy. I'll stop there.
Yes, this is a very important point to be bringing up. And there was a time during what was known as the Ingavi Trust Party, and I had good fortune to be a part of it, and there was lots of discussions on this, and even prior to it, there was discussions because, Prabhupada sometimes would say, it simply requires that one, which is interesting because we're talking about the 1% now, He said if there's 1 or 2% of the population that are pure devotees, the entire planet can become Vaikuntha. And then there would be the discussion, does this mean that everyone could be a pure devotee? And but also I just wanted to make a couple of apparently contradictory points, but they're not. One is, like say, is it the Rajasuya? Which one is it where they send the horse out?
Yeah.
So there are states. In the one world government, there's states that are just like in the universe. There's planets and there's predominating deities. So there are regional leaders. They all surrender to the, the central emperor, and that's where the commerce comes from. How you have this, we need that. There's bartering. There's evidence of commerce going on way before the modern historical teachings that we're taught. And there's even, I think, in Manasada Buddha's books, there's a map. It's something like 15,000 years old or something. And it shows all the continents. It shows Antarctica, and it shows things on Antarctica that they didn't even know existed. It shows it without any ice. It shows all of the different continents, but also that's regardless of all of that. But the principal point is that, and another quick side point is, I recall about 1972, for some reason, Bhagavatam had certain very, old, I think it had to do with his connection with Kirtananda, but there was a BTG article from the 50s, 1950s. It was actually like a mimeographed copy of it, and it was called One World Government. I have yet to find it in one of the databases that has all of the early back to Godheads. And it talks about one God, one scripture, one language. English, he says, because the English have already spread it, but the Brahmins should all know Sanskrit. One flag, on and on like that. But then you have, in more recent decades, there's a lot of wings of ISKCON where you have those people that are heavily influenced by capitalism, and if you bring in spiritual communism, there's discussions that get intense. But that concept that Srila Prabhupada was seeing, and again, like you said, if this is to happen in this age or not, it definitely seemed as if Prabhupada thought the potential was there, and that we should be prepared for it and know about it. But again, my understanding is that he never seemed to, that everyone will be a pure devotee, that they'll be trained, and there'll be laws about breaking relative principles, just like there's laws right now, thou shalt not kill. Okay, so, and which very interesting. If you look, I don't know if it's still in Webster's dictionary, but I looked up the definition of, because they had changed the Bible to thou shalt not murder. Mm-hmm. So I looked up the definition of murder wasn't even, maybe in the dictionary, but also in the Georgia state law, because we were running for mayor there. And there it says, the taking of the life of any animate entity, and then it said, example, human, cow, horse. This is stated in their state law. It used to be in Webster's. I don't know if they've changed that. So those laws should be followed, but to the extent that everyone, but also basically sometimes there would be discussions on morning walks. I remember with Satsvarup Maharaj, there was one discussion that one of the professors was concerned that if we actually were to become, because at that point it seemed like we were really on a roll, and he was concerned that if we actually were in charge, people like him we couldn't exist. And Prabhupada was saying that we don't mind if someone is following the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ or Muhammad or Guru Nanak, as long as you actually follow, that you don't pretend to follow or misrepresent those teachings. Prabhupada was very careful about this unity and diversity and unity. So these are very important points to understand. And but yeah, I don't. And sometimes I think it's going to be obviously not. I don't think it's going to be in our lifetimes because it would take too much. Personally, I think it's going to take calamities that would bring people together, a cleansing of some kind. And but it is the possibility. But I want to stress the point that, because it's there all throughout Western philosophy. Plato wrote the Utopia. There's all sorts of discussions, even if you study the Orwellian writings and so on. They're talking about there's like a pyramid. There's the 1%, and then there's a 5%, and then there's the masses underneath. They're always working towards, but there's also the devious dark side of this. That's always a concern. And it's misused with Darwinian survival of the fittest, where they then decide who's fit, the misunderstanding of what RN means. These things have been misunderstood and misused. But it's a discussion that we should be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And the philosophy is there. Anyway, I'm rambling. But
No, thank you. It was a very good comment. So like I was saying, we have to know, the actual philosophy and theory behind spiritual communism, and we have to understand how this idea can be terribly misused and exploited.
Exactly.
A knife, you can use it to save somebody's life in a surgery, or you can kill them on the street to rob them. You know what I mean? And there's nothing's good, nothing's bad. When it's utilized, Prabhupada said, when it's utilized according to the directions of Shastra and saintly people, then the real result comes. But when it's separated from the direction of Shastra and sadhus, then it gets messed up.
But it's Prabhupada definitely had. I don't know what happened to that BTG article. I've been trying to find it, and I'm wondering sometimes there's certain things I think some of the leaders were concerned about. But Prabhupada did say, I heard at least twice where the British paid Darwin. Darwin read the Padma Purana where it describes the different species and how the different species evolved. But he left out the antimatter, the soul. That's where he got his, because they wanted to destroy the Vedic civilization. So, it's a very important discussion. But I've resolved that, because it was very frustrating in the beginning when we were really getting good feedback. I just felt like after a while it's paramount is in control, and I just have to take care of my own, heart. Cleanse my own heart. He's in control. Things will happen in his time. We can't force the issue, or sound too revolutionary. Actually, Prabhupada even said to me in a letter, he said, when you have the chance, talk about Krishna, don't talk about politics.
Oh, yeah.
When you're talking about the class, I should do it more often, but I was listening to Prabhupada, and how he made a point, maybe you can comment further if you like, about how the society right now has no head. And then I heard him say, or cracked head, crazy, like that. So, like, he was mentioning that example, they're sending men or women that are in a different class, like, not Satya, but in a different, and they're sending these college students, I don't know, they're different people, but they're sending them to the different wards in the world or something.
Yeah, so we can't criticize a body for doing everything wrong when we see that it's missing a head. Of course they're doing everything wrong because they're missing a head. So Prabhupada wanted the devotees to come up to that level of being qualified to be the head of society, which means we're advisors and teachers and like that, you know? So unless and until the head is properly situated, we can't all be so surprised and freaked out about the fact that the body's doing everything wrong, you know? That it's unhealthy and broken and evil or whatever. So unless and until we take up that responsibility, we don't have anyone to blame. And we can't take up that responsibility if we don't become qualified. How are we going to give advice and instruction when we don't understand it ourselves?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We got to study like real good to understand these things. Then we could be in a position to advise. So we can't really complain about the world being messed up because what are we doing to not make it messed up? Are we being ahead or are we just being another peon, you know? It may take a couple generations for our devotees to get that qualified.
It's a question of purifying the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. We just have to keep making our little baby steps forward. At least we know what the goal is.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we should stop there. Srimad Bhagavatam,
Ki
Ki Jai,
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Ki Jai.
So it appears that it worked.